This is the Braver Angels Film Club, and hopefully you have seen the film Can We Take a Joke? And we're here to discuss it. We're generally about once a month meeting and discussing films that we hope will have a good discussion and have people share ideas from different points of view. And I guess I'll take over for Ron's question because he was supposed to open up. So, would anybody want to start the discussion by talking about what you learned from the documentary? This is, I've been hankering to have a documentary about comedy to discuss because comedy is kind of getting controversial these days. And this particular documentary did trace the history of comedy becoming controversial back with Lenny Bruce and coming up to the contemporary period. So Max, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, well, the film presented very strong voices in favor of no censorship whatever, free speech, and defended anything that anybody wanted to say about anybody as free speech that shouldn't be squashed. And I feel very strongly about this issue. I feel very strongly about free speech, and I also feel very strongly of not stigmatizing and making fun of certain portions of our population, because I think this is really what Braver Angel is all about, that we respect everyone and we don't want to disrespect anyone. And then anybody can say anything is just a joke. You know, don't get offended. It's just a joke. Can't you take a joke? Well, I think that's not necessarily a good defense. So the really nugget of this discussion, as I understand it, is, you know, where does free speech stop? Does it stop anywhere? And is it okay for large groups of people or anybody to feel dissed and made fun of? We always, you know, I give lots of lectures on the topic of how do discriminatory actions start? How do people get energized to persecute any particular group? And I think it starts with dissing them, making fun of them. And that's a very dangerous thing. And so is hampering or squashing free speech. So it's I think, a very important topic. I think there is a limit to free speech. The question is who gets to set the limit?
So you generally disagree with the extent of the viewpoint in the movie. Is that right?
Yeah, right. I think we should think seriously about at least putting out some standards for what we as Braver Angels allow and feel okay about as far as free speech is concerned, that makes fun of and puts down certain elements of the population. You know, if you make fun of me, I can say, oh, well, you know, don't take it personally that you're just a funny guy. But if you make fun of whatever, when I was growing up, we made fun of Polish people and called them Polacks. And it started with a whole series of jokes. How many Polacks does it take to change a light bulb? You know, as soon as you identify a group, I think you run the risk of, you know, damaging that group.
Right, right. Well, let's see how the other people in this meeting is, what they feel. Existential Bob, I think you were number 2.
Now, hi there. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, first, I watched the movie again, and I was very disturbed about poor Lenny Bruce, the Pascal Lamb. I mean, you're in a comedy club, and he was only arrested because the police were there waiting for him to say something. I mean, a lot of these comedians are getting beaten up in the very venue they're allowed to make these jokes in general, which really upset me. The other thing I wanted to mention, do we have any people here who follow Bill Maher on TV or YouTube? Good, because he did
Yes,
a
I'm
thing
a
that's on.
fan.
This is a thing on YouTube now. He did a thing called Jokes for Idiots. Which has anybody seen that? Do watch the Jokes for Idiots. He's explaining what a joke is and why it's funny, and which adds
Oh,
credence to the program. The
huh.
last thing I'm just curious about one thing. No, it's true. Quite often a joke is at the expense of somebody else. And there's an old saying, man plus banana peel equal ha ha. Why is it when somebody falls that off of a ladder or we chuckle at that? And it's an interesting concept that Max was making about whether it's Polish jokes. Used to have in the 70s the official Polish joke book, the official Jewish joke book. They had the Italian joke book. They had the Irish joke book. It was very popular then. And we have to, I guess, laugh at each other. But I'm just wondering, and I'll end here, who are these new people? Who are the people making these rules? I don't know. Where's this governing body that says what we can and cannot? I just want to close by saying what Bill Maher said in his things about jokes for idiots. What's going to be left, the only two things we'll be able to make jokes about is that they got your name wrong at Starbucks and how bad the food is on airlines. That's all we're going to be left to make jokes about.
All
And
right.
except, again,
Well,
who are the ones making these rules and censoring us? Who are these police? That's what I'd like to understand.
yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Let's hear from Gus.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you, Ivan. And this film, obviously, I got this invitation in my email inbox, and I, I looked at it very interested because I've actually done stand-up comedy. I've only done it like 4 times so far. I'm gonna do it next Monday, but I am concerned with like at least free speech as comedian because the general rule start out because at least starting out, don't they say don't tell like jokes about like race or rape or any real controversial subjects like that. But the thing is, even like when I write jokes, I sometimes think, will they be okay with that? Because the place I've done stand-up comedy several parts, it's a place where I've done improv as well, and it's got basically a general left-wing view. You can't make like very like PC and stuff. And it kind of just like, even while I'm not deliberately going out to try to offend people, I just look at a joke like, okay, could someone be offended by it? And it's kind of stifling at least my creativity as well. Like the fear of getting canceled over something I think is innocuous, but someone else thinks is more like offensive, so to speak. And it just, it's something that concerns me, obviously, because it could theoretically affect me personally. And like some of the people in the comedians they interviewed in the video, like Gilbert Gottfried, he died last year, and Lisa Lampanelli, she actually retired from stand-up and became a life coach. So fewer of those people like that. I fear it's like it could definitely continue in that direction.
Well, so it's interesting to hear from you, Gus, because you're maybe one of the few stand-ups that are actually participating in this. When you have an event or a room that you're playing, are you trying to gauge each audience to know where the limit is?
Uh, Primarily, my thing is just at this moment when I'm starting out, I mean, it's just like getting laughs is my main thing. Though if somebody like comes up after me in the show and like tells me, oh, I'm offended by that, which hasn't happened yet, but if it did, I would at least reconsider it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's interesting. How about Alan?
A second to unmute there. I really enjoyed the movie. It was a really good tribute to Lenny Bruce and all the stuff that's happened since then. I get the feeling that the US culture has just gotten so thin-skinned that virtually any minor scratch creates a tumor in the skin or the mind of the scratchy. And I think that's almost a decay of culture. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and some of the greatest comedians were Jewish and Irish and whatever else. And they made fun of themselves, they made fun of everyone else. And it didn't seem to hurt anyone as much as people think they are being hurt today. And to answer Max a little bit, the police today are anyone who thinks they've been offended. So there's no rules. Everyone makes up their own rules for themselves, and judge, jury, and executioner. And if they didn't like your joke, they're going to see if they can get you fired using their own rules. And I think it's really a disaster. And just to echo something that was said just a minute ago, I grew a sense of humor in college, and I get a really good one. I can keep people amused for hours on end. And as I put it recently, I can do sit-down comedy, I can do stand-up comedy. I've been known to do lying down comedy, which is at my physical therapist. But it really bugs me that everybody has turned into a thin-skinned nebbish who can't take anything that is minorly offensive. This is the whole woke business. It drives me crazy. I think it's a real detriment to the culture. I'll shut up now. I'll probably be back later. Thank you.
Okay, let's just do one more because we're spending quite a lot of time on this. How about you, Cynthia?
Thank you. I appreciate comedy very much. I really like Dave Chappelle, but I think there was a difference in that film, and I recognized that it was made in 2015, that kind of overlooked one distinction, and that a very critical distinction, and that was that if you're a professional comic and people are paying to go to see you, or they have an expectation of what they're going to find there, that's one thing. But the thing they overlooked was that person they did mention kind of in passing, the woman who was jumped on and had her life destroyed because of the comment on social media. And that's a whole different kind of thing, that social media, willingness to, and a one-sided willingness to destroy someone else based upon a whole bunch of expectations and all that stuff is a different world. And there wasn't a lot of enough attention paid to that. And I realized there were probably reasons why, but that's a different aspect. And it's one we are not at all prepared to deal with in any shape or form. So I wanted to raise that issue.
Okay. As I said, I just wanted to move on, and we have so many different questions we wanted to pose to the group. I'll turn it over to Ron.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that delay, but man, we got a lot of hands up. Well, we should have finished out on that. But the second question has to do with why today are comedians at the forefront of a battle against a new assault on freedom of speech? We kind of addressed that in that first question, but we can continue on with that. Please explain as well. So it looks like Max, did you put your hand down from the previous time, or do you want to speak on that question?
Well, I always have something to say, but I most wanted to say something with regard to that woman who got dissed because of a comment she made on social media. It wasn't just a short segment, Cynthia. It was a fairly long segment, I thought, and I think an important one, because people were out to destroy her. They didn't just want her to rethink it or say what you said is unacceptable, but they wanted to diss her and really did hurt her. And that shows the other side of the question. You know, you can either hurt the victim or you can, you know, the target of the joke or the joke teller.
Thank you, Max. Lenny, how about you? Do you want me to repeat the second question?
What was the second question?
The second question is why is it today it seems like the comedians are the forefront of the battle against the assault of freedom of speech? Okay, it seems, yeah, that's the second question.
My wife, Lenore, would like to make a comment.
Well, welcome, Lenore. Let's see her smiley face there.
What I would like to say is that some of the things we're talking about are specifically problems with social media. And that's specifically what's happening to comedians, which, by the way, I don't think people should be trashed on social media. And I don't think that comedians should be assaulted or on stage. But one of the things the film didn't do is it didn't give us any raw data about this. How many times this has happened, let's say, in a year? How many, you know, are we really dealing with something that's national or something that's local? Where are these events happening? Are we looking at state? And
it's Twitter, it's everywhere.
Right, but where are these people coming from? It's not just Twitter, we're talking about the comedians also. And whatever happened to just what used to happen, if you didn't like what somebody had to say or you didn't like their language, is you stomped out and you demanded your money back. I really wonder how many of these events are natural outpourings or organized by people. And that's two different things. Somebody who just gets up there and says something versus some of the organized attempts to censor the community. And I think we have to look at those specifically. We don't have the data to know that. Okay.
Okay. Marcy, right? Okay. Well, we're going on to Christina. How about you, Christina? Take yourself off mute.
Hi. Well, with regards to the question about comedians, my presumption is that there isn't universal agreement amongst comedians about what it means to tell a joke. I was curious about the title of the film. That was the immediate thing that kind of jumped to my mind. Was the title of the film is "Can We Take a Joke?" And there's a question mark at the end. So there's like a question being asked in the title of the film. And then I immediately jumped to, is that actually the question? Is that the question that we should be pondering? And I started by actually going to the dictionary and looking up the definition of a joke. And the definition of a joke isn't to poke fun at someone. The definition of a joke is to make someone laugh. And I guess the question that I'm now asking, and the question that I'm wondering if we should be talking about, is not so much can we take a joke, but why do we think poking fun at somebody is funny? And that's the question that's on my mind. Why is that funny? And I think a lot of comedians do think it's funny, and I think that's why they use it in their material. But I ask, as a society, why do we think that it's funny to poke fun at people? Yeah, Christina, let's try to merge that with the question at hand. And man, I love that question that you proposed. Well, do you think that's why are comedians at the forefront of the battle, do you think? Or are they at the forefront of the battle with freedom of speech? How's that emerge with that? Well, I guess my thinking is that they're at the forefront of the battle because they're being attacked for poking fun at people. But okay. I think that they're poking fun at people because there's this ideology that making a joke or being funny is at someone else's expense. And I've witnessed plenty of comedy, be it television comedy or stand-up comedy, where people can be very, very funny without making fun of people. And yet for some reason, a lot of comedians kind of gravitate towards the making fun of other people or having them be the butt of their jokes because they think that adds a level of humor to what they're doing. And so I guess the question that I'm asking is, why as a society do we find that humorous? Because maybe culturally, if we didn't find that humorous, then comedians wouldn't be gravitating towards that as their material, and they wouldn't have to feel like they're being criticized or judged for what they're presenting. And again, I think that's to the answer to your question is, I think they're at the forefront of this argument because they're being questioned about their material, because there are people that are questioning why they're using other people at their expense.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina. Oh, Judith, how about you? And you're on mute, Judith.
Sorry, okay. Hi. It seems to, well, we know we are a very divided country. And it seems to me that the same people that are offended by jokes that make fun of people are also very sensitive to the paparazzi stalking celebrities. And those that think that, hey, that's what they signed up for. They wanted to be a celebrity, tough, are also, can't you take a joke type of people. And as far as free speech is concerned, well, I just want to throw something else in there. I don't know if anybody's seen the documentary Stutz, where Jonah Hill has his sessions with his psychiatrist. And much of that is his angst and depression because comedians make fun of his weight. So as far as free speech is concerned, I think it's a wonderful, principle. I love our freedoms, but I don't believe it should be an all-encompassing umbrella and, apply to the slippery slope theory. I think it should be specific to situations. I think Jonah Hill deserves his dignity. And I think comedians deserve to be as, funny, whichever way they want to be funny. And the people who go to see them should be aware of what they're signing up for.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you. How about Ron? How about you, Ron?
Hey, I'm on mute. Thank you. First of all, I don't think comedians are in the forefront of the freedom of speech movement. I think it's more on the college campuses, and the professors are really on the forefront. But that's not the topic tonight.
No. You could stay there, Ron.
Well, I'd like to go back to comedy and stick with the topic.
Okay, go for it.
I think what's important to think about comedy is comedians who punch down versus punching up. Someone said earlier that a lot of the genocide started off with humor, which is absolutely correct, but it was punching down. Example, if I were to make a joke about a Black man who was really stupid and had lots of kids all over the place, that would be so offensive. I would never make that joke, and everybody on this call would be offended. The minute I start punching up and put the name Herschel Walker on there, all of a sudden it becomes okay. Stephen Colbert told those jokes for an entire month, every night of the week. And that is absolutely true also for David Chappelle. He got criticized within the Jewish community horribly for his Saturday Night Live monologue talking about the old diatribe about Jews running Hollywood. And in fact, if they had paid attention and listened, they would realize he wasn't punching down at Jews. He was punching up at Kanye for making those kinds of statements. So I kind of wish there would be a distinction in people's minds between hateful punching down and making fun of those, in other words, punching up, making those who make those kinds of jokes. And then, Ron, to your point, with everything I've read on free speech, what's happening in the college campuses to professors who say the most innocent, not making a joke, they just try to do a lecture on something and allude to something that offends the students, and the next thing they know, they're on suspension or may even lose their jobs. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say something more to you on that, Ron. But when the distinction is the title comedian versus you, I mean, like most people, when they go to a comedy show, man, the historical narrative of that is, boy, there might be some hurt feelings. So, it's a little bit different from maybe possibly being in a classroom versus being at a comedy show. Yeah. Anyway, but thank you for your contrast. Alan, how about you, Alan? And man, we got a lot of hands up. So the other guys, let me know if we're going too far on this question. How about you, Alan?
I'll try to keep it short. I did a senior paper in college on humor. So if you want to know what humor really is, you can do some research and find out a little bit about what I found out. Humor is a kind of tension release of realizing that it's happening to the other guy and not you. And one of the archetypes of that was Dick Van Dyke. And he did pratfalls in virtually every one of his TV episodes. And it's the idea he's getting hurt and not me. And that's one thing that makes a joke funny. Likewise, picking on someone else means you're not picking on me. So that is a tension reliever. And a lot of humor that's all it has to do with it. And so I just wanted a little educational background from something I did. And I got a nice score on the paper, except the idiot professor wouldn't let me keep a copy of it. But that's his neurosis, not mine.
Unbelievable.
But little FYI there.
All right, Alan. Thank you. Now, Jordan, now is you got your hand up, Jordan. Now, are you going to talk about freedom, speak the forefront? Yeah, go for it. Talk about that. Yeah.
Sure. So I agree that I don't think comedians are necessarily at the forefront of the battle over freedom of speech. But what is interesting is that they saw the issues first. They were one of the first groups to see the issues. And that's because building off of those comments about what is a joke, what is humor, you don't know ahead of time what's going to be funny and what isn't going to be funny. Yeah. And I don't claim to be very good at it, but like Gus, I've stood in front of a microphone a few times and tried to do that. And it is very much an art. It's a process of discovery. And I think there was a quote from one of the famous comedians in the movie saying that the comedian's job is to find the line and sort of push over it. And building on that tension release that the previous speaker was talking about, you just don't know what's causing people tension. You don't know what's going to be funny, but typically, at least in a society that's not, extremely racist or discriminatory or in the midst of all out hatred, you have to have something clever about it. You have to hit on something that people are thinking about. You have to present it in a funny way. You have to say something that you're not supposed to say, but in a way that's funny. And that process of discovery really can't go on in a environment where people are drawing arbitrary rules all over the place and nobody knows what's okay and what's not okay. So you essentially limit the effectiveness or the potential good that could come from art by doing that.
Thank you, Jordan. I think the person that you're speaking of was George Carlin. I think was it Carlin? Anyway, is it who's that?
Eric Goodra, yeah.
Hi, Eric.
Oh, hello, Ron. Yes, glad to be here. Yeah, I saw the movie. I loved it. Great documentary. I seem to be, surprisingly to me, and kind of in the minority for I liked the documentary. Kind of agreed with it. They taught me, in drama class, in middle school or I think high school. Yeah, the thing about humor, all humor is cruel. If Dick Van Dyke falls down some stairs, I mean that's funny. Okay, it's he's the butt of the joke, but it's also we're laughing kind of then at him. I think there's the distinction that we make between we've decided that there's some people that we can't make fun of right now or ever because there's punching up and punching down. I think that's an artificial distinction that hasn't been made in the past. I think it's not useful. For example, there's a show right now called it was on TV for a long time. Apparently, a bunch of my lefty friends thought it was the best show ever. I guess I saw it for a little bit. It's called Schitt's Creek. The basic idea is they're making fun of a lot of people. The two kinds of people that they make fun of is I saw about 4, 5, 6 episodes or something. They make fun of the 1%, and they make fun of rural whites. And those are both people that we think right now are okay. That is punching up. And I think it's an artificial distinction. So yeah, I guess that would be my point.
All right. Well, thank you for your point, Eric. I was going to end with Molly, but Molly, you talk to the president or someone? Or you want to speak, Molly, on the question? You're on mute, or can't hear you. How about
Sorry
I go
about
to
that. Yeah, I'm having to
okay.
use two devices right now. So I just wanted to reaffirm one person's point and counter another point. Can you guys hear me okay?
No, we can. We can. We can hear you. Sorry about that.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to reaffirm the point that there are so many ways of being funny that do not involve mocking people. And also, I do think making fun of oneself or one's own culture is completely fine most of the time. I think there are some stereotypes that go way too far. And, you know, one line that was not explored or I didn't see explored in the film was the line of reinforcing negative, dangerous stereotypes. It's very clear to me that there are kinds of ways of mocking groups that actually do not only reinforce dangerous stereotypes, but can ultimately lead to violence. And sometimes you don't know that until too late. So I will say that as much as I, decry the cancel culture examined in the film and can't stand cancel culture at all, I also think the film did not do a good job of discussing the other kinds of jokes. And I'll say, in terms of why comedians are at the forefront, they are meant to push the boundaries and they're more able to push the boundaries. Just like, looking at art or reading a poem gets us to explore things we're uncomfortable with. I think that comedians have the license to do so. But I also want to mention, and I'm a game designer, a game publisher and designer. I make funny games for a living. And to my knowledge, I have managed across now 5 games to only maybe offend 3 people and have just removed some of the offending cards. And people still find our stuff hilarious. I literally am funny for a living with card games, and I have found it sometimes is very hard because people are so used to offensive humor being the go-to. But actually, if you work in the field of comedy at all, there's a lot of ways to make people laugh that do not involve mocking people for their ethnicity or their religion or their disability or whatever, their gender or their color, So I just want to reaffirm that point from earlier.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you. Good point. Linda, you'll be the last one, Linda. And then we'll move on to Ivan with the next question. Sorry about that, Douglas. Take yourself off mute, Linda. There you go.
Yes. I just have to comment something about on Schitt's Creek. We've watched every episode, and it's just the opposite of what Ellen was talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of, as it goes on, you see that they're not making fun of these people. The people are stronger than they are. The main characters don't come out very, very well in it. It's mostly the people they deal with and how smart and how wonderful they are, and that everybody's the same. So humor sometimes takes some time to look at what really the message is in a joke. I started watching this documentary and I was wondering where the people are that were going to be interviewed about the ones that were hurt by these comics, and I never saw anybody. I didn't see one person that, a real person. They had them screaming, or things like that, but nobody had a conversation like with Braver Angels wants to do about, why were you hurt by this? And then maybe the comic could take that in as a message.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, Linda. I always liked, if I went to a comedian place and they said some jokes about my ethnicity, and I know their reputation, sometimes I'm probably the loudest laugher, because I'm not of that, what he's saying. He's just making a joke, and I just don't take it personally, but in today's climate, the question needs to be asked, why? you know, just like you said. All right, we'll move on. I'm sorry. I see Bob wanted to come up, but we're going to move on to Ivan with the third question. Great responses, everyone.
Thanks, Ron. Kind of doing a little bit of a change on this question. I want to ask about the truth-telling function of jokes and comedians. Most of the time we think of that in terms of political satire. I was thinking further, and really truth-telling is about us also. When comedians make jokes about the habits of people that everybody has, or they talk about marriage and all the difficulties of marriage. The question is, has that truth-telling function for comedians changed these days? Is it a different type of or the world, how it works, or about people?
Ivan, you're freezing up a little bit. I don't know if we heard the full question.
Oh.
Try it again, Ivan.
Okay. The question is about, has the truth-telling function of...
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead on.
Change these days.
I'll do the question and then we'll work on that. Okay. How has the truth-telling of comics changed over time? Are today's comedians the only bipartisan truth tellers? Has it become harder to do political comedy, especially on college campuses? So that's a threefold question there. I didn't. Ivan was going to change that up a little bit, but I'll just give you the full fledged of it. Does everyone get that? How about Gus? You have, oh, I know, Bob. I'm sorry, Bob's hand up there. Essential Bob. Why don't you?
Oh, hello there.
How you doing,
Bob? I know. I was just typing something. I wanted to mention briefly. Does everybody remember Larry Wilde?
Yeah, Bob. Bob. Let me excuse me. Sure. Did you hear the question? Did you hear the question that we?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question part?
Okay. How does the truth telling of comics changed over time?
Okay. That touches upon the issue of what exactly is truth.
Okay.
And what I wanted to do is many stereotypes that we joke about, whether it's Jewish, African American, Black, Polish, Irish, go on and on. Are there not some kernels of truth about these populations that we just caricature or exaggerate on and look at the humorous aspects of them? Okay. That's where I was questioning about the truth. And I wanted to mention about Larry Wilde, who was born Herman Wildman. He did the official Polish joke book, the official Irish joke book, the Jewish, the Black, and so on. Mm-hmm. And he's still alive, 95, from Jersey City. And he touched upon, he basically was, I see comedy as a caricaturist that brings out, in a funny way, those features. And when you say, is it true or not true? And please don't condemn me, world, for this. They portray the Scotsmen or Scottish people as cheap. They portray Jewish people as cheap. They portray Irish or dumb blondes as dumb. They portray, Irish as drunk. I mean, why do these stereotypes even exist that we use in comedy? Is there any truth in that? That's how I understand your question.
So Bob, the truth of it, can it go over generations or time? Because in that time, there was a lot of things possibly that may not have been a good stereotype, and then you say it now. So that's what the question. It played in that time period.
Yeah.
What about now?
I really don't know what to think because, again, I'm puzzled with the word truth or opinion. Again, The name Existential Bob is an existentialist. I don't believe anything is true or false, just opinion and agreement. That's a whole nother issue.
Thank you, Bob. That is true, because there is something with opinions versus, it's like, okay, by my opinion, he's funny. He's funny. But your opinion, he may not be funny. So it just,
Well, at least in this culture, we're cancel culturing people, not like other countries where you say something humorous or not humorous against the president, they execute you.
Yeah. Well, I hope not. But anyway, I'm going to go on to Gus. Thank you, Bob.
Thank
Gus. Yeah.
Just trying to find the unmute button, moving all around.
That's okay. So you get the gist of that question. You know, it's pretty worded, but do you like the second part of it says, are today's comedians the only bipartisan truth tellers? That's funny.
I think that today there are I'm trying to think of any comedian alive today who I could call a bipartisan. Well, like the South Park guys would probably be the closest ones, because like so freaking many comedians only play to one side politically. I mean, late night comedy is basically all left wing, and like basically like the conservative comedians, they just like talk about conservative stuff. So it's just because back at like, at least when it comes to like late night talk, so like Johnny Carson never talked about politics, Leno, or at least when they did, they make fun both sides, Leno, David Letterman early on, but that's basically become really tribal. They only like make fun of one side. And me personally, by doing stand-up, I just avoid political humor altogether. Just number one, it's polarizing. Number two, I legitimately am conservative leaning politically, and the stand-up scene in my city is very left-wing, so I legit could get canceled if I go on that. But I just want to find what unites people as opposed to.
All right, thank you, Gus. Yeah, good point. How about you, Cynthia?
I want to make the point that satire is meant to bring out be a truth-telling format, and that's actually especially in commercial terms. Satire has gotten more people can't. The Smothers Brothers are a classic example of corporations censoring people, and they still will. I mean, if anything, it's much easier to make fun of someone else on whatever side because you're going to generate audience engagement that way. But if you start making fun of the corporations themselves, you're likely not getting any sponsorship anywhere, anytime. So, all righty.
So that goes to that one of the third part of that question about the politicalness of being a comedian. It says, has it become harder to be a political comedian? Anyway, thank you, Cynthia. Douglas, how about you?
Hi. This has been an interesting discussion. I think that it's gone a long way from what I thought we were going to cover, though, because censorship means the government tells you can't say something. Yeah. And that's really not the issue anymore. Yeah. The issue from the documentary and from what I've seen and on college campuses is that there are a lot of people who take joy in showing their outrage and seeing how far they can take it. That's a personal choice. And it's something that society needs to recommend. There was an earlier question where one of the comments was, we need to know where we should draw the lines. That's societal. It's not governmental. It's not actual censorship. The issue is, should people have to risk their livelihoods because they say something inappropriate? And I think obviously the answer should be no, but a lot of people think too bad. Like that poor lady who made the comment about being white heading to South Africa. Yeah. You know, she was just being a wise guy. And she got destroyed. She wasn't even a comedian. And I'm pretty sure that won't be her next career move either. I think that, you know, I don't think the government is the problem. I think people are the problem, and people feel like they've got the internet and they can just go off and say whatever they want and see how much outrage they can stir up against person A. Political satirists, I think, are under the most pressure for facing that, because if they say something that is not even necessarily what the offended people think they said, they're gone.
Yeah. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you very much. I will take the last one, and then I'll have Ivan Edward will be the last one, and then Ivan, you come back in, see how your audio is. Hi, Edward.
Thank you. Yep. So I put in the chat the scientific citation on the issue of stereotype accuracy. Okay. And the lead of the abstract of that scientific article was, stereotype accuracy is one of the largest and most replicable effects in all of social psychology. In other words, it is scientifically known that many stereotypes that we hold about groups of people or cultural phenomenon are actually probably pretty accurate. Not 100%, maybe not 95%, but often quite accurate. And that is why people laugh at jokes about their own folks. For example, the horrible, terrible, demeaning jokes that drag queens tell about gay people laugh at because there's a kernel of truth there. Or the horrible stereotyping, mocking humor of rural people in kind of redneck humor. Country people can laugh at because there's a kernel of truth there. And people of other groups can say that about themselves. So there's a kernel of truth very often in stereotypes. And the scientific article goes on to say that the legacy of scientists and academics and cultural elites and influencers who have tried for a very long time to say that stereotypes are not accurate. And the main reason they do that is for social control. And that is, pardon me, one reason why I think you often not have many conservatives in these talks, and often not many rural people, but a lot of rural people don't have the internet either, right? Because they know the dominant culture wants to control them in any way possible, politically, culturally, financially, economically. That is one aspect of this that I wanted to bring out. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. That's pretty interesting. You brought a lot of data. Man, I wonder how many conservatives are on this line. We need to take a poll one of these days, or people from a different part of the country. But thank you very much. All right, Ivan, take it over. The fourth question.
Okay. Ron, can you hear me fine?
Super, I can hear your voice.
Okay, I took off my video. I think that helps. For this question, I'm going to get into an issue that's not really directly part of the movie, but if you watch the movie, you notice that there are relatively few women in this movie, and in the comedy world generally, there are relatively few women. Why is that? Is it an aspect of the aspiring comedians, the people that are drawn to that kind of performance? Or is it a function of the audience, that the audience doesn't respond to women? What do you think? Linda.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of women in comedy now. Mrs. Mizell there on TV, she's her show is one of the most popular. I know a lot. Yeah, the women have almost taken over comedy as far as I'm concerned. Saturday Night Live.
Even in the stand-up arena, you're saying that there's
stand-up. What's her name? Tig.
Yeah, Tig Navarro.
Tig Navarro. She talks about herself. She talks about having breast cancer and things like that.
Right.
Women respond to that. I don't respond to stereotypical humor. I don't find it funny. I don't think it's true, even if you say it is. I don't like mother-in-law jokes, for instance. They really hurt me. And I'll put it right out there. I have two daughter-in-laws, and when I hear mother-in-law jokes, I just kind of feel bad. And I think that's the way people feel sometimes, but they don't say anything. I don't say anything about it, but I'm saying it now. And that's one thing that's everybody tells mother-in-law jokes, but I don't think they're funny. They're hurtful.
Well, and in the chat, Molly is sharing information that she says there's a source that says 11% of stand-up comedians are women. So
maybe because they don't want to travel.
It may be true. It may be true that what I observed was that there's not that many. Molly, did you want to say more?
She has a dollar phone.
Oh.
I'll just say, let someone else go first, actually.
Oh, okay.
How about we had a couple
How about you, Alan?
Yeah.
Alan.
Me? Oh, okay. Yeah, what do I want to say? Oh, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos from the dry bar comedy clubs, and there's a lot of women there. I think it's just a cultural acceptance of women that are getting more of a voice in public speaking, and they're getting out there. So, and there were quite a few women interviewed in the video too, and they're funny people. I watched some of the dry bar comics, and they are just wonderful. So they're finding their voice to becoming more popular, and it's like it's a learning curve, and you're getting more visibility of them. So we're getting there, I think, like everything else.
Okay. All right. Thomas, what do you have to say? You're on.
Yes, I actually did not intentionally raise my hand, but I was going to make a comment. It might be off point rather than writing it, but it's not focused exclusively on free speech and comedy. It's more a general point about the notion that, now we see a lot of censorship, supposedly left-wing censorship on college campuses. I think there's some truth to that, but just to make sure this point is not lost, cancel culture, I think, originally is conservative, and we see that manifested in the present, most conspicuously in the state of Florida, where they're trying to lead the country in book banning, apparently, and things you can't talk about.
Excuse me, Thomas. The question at hand is about women in comedy.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a subjective perception that there's lots of women in stand-up comedy. I don't think there's any barrier to entry, although I'm sure they have to overcome barriers, male biases in making their way into the profession if they do it for money, as a profession. But yeah, I don't think there's any overt stereotype. You can see female comics all over the place on the internet, on television, and so forth. Thank you.
All right. So I guess the majority opinion so far is there is no shortage of women in comedy. Linda, let's see. Linda me? There was a
I think she forgot
McKinney.
to put her name down.
Linda McKinney.
Yes. I'm actually I'm a storyteller, and most of my stories are humorous. And I think they're humorous because I make fun of myself and my own life situations, and then they're relatable situations. I'm also on a path to attempting to do stand-up. And when we talk about women in comedy, I think that as a stand-up comedian, because now you're on the stage and you're extremely vulnerable. And if we just look at women who put themselves out in the public eye, they are judged on so many different levels than a man would be judged. A woman is going to be looked at more for her clothing and her hair and her weight and her just a plethora of things. You think about, just look at a woman in politics and how we talk about women in politics, and we very often talk about how they look and rather than what their message is. So I think that for a woman, and I know this is true for me, for a woman to step up on the stage and do stand-up comedy, it takes a lot of bravery and also being able to put aside what other people might think about you, which is not always an easy thing to do.
So do you think the result is that there are fewer women?
Yes, I think there are fewer women in stand-up if you looked at the overall picture. Wasn't Molly's statistics saying that 80-some% of men are stand-up comedians? Isn't that what you said?
She said 11% of the stand-ups are women.
Yeah, 11%. Well, that's low when you say.
Yeah.
So that's not a high
Right.
percentage. So I'm just guessing that that's one of the contributing factors is is how we're judged when we put ourselves in the public eye, how we're subject to many more aspects of judgment than perhaps a man might be.
Right. Well, I'm sorry for everybody else who's got their hand up. I want to move to the next question because we have such enthusiastic response to today's session. The next question is about the comment, going back to the George Carlin comment about finding the line and going over it, crossing over it. When somebody crosses the line and some people's reaction is outrage and some people just find it funny, does your reaction reveal your moral standing? Are the people that say that they're outraged more demonstrating their moral purity or moral superiority? Or are the people who are laughing at that joke demonstrating their moral deficiency? What's the morality of your response or people's response to outrageous comedy? Or do you think it has nothing to do with it? Morality has nothing to do with it. Molly, did you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. I will keep this brief. I will just say that I think this is both the problem and the solution, that like everyone has a different. So I think we've all heard jokes that offended us, and I don't think the answer that the movie gave over and over, which was funny in itself, hey, just don't come to the club, I don't think that was sufficient, because if you, I'm Jewish, I'm going to say I have permission to do the following. If you make jokes about Jews killing Jesus and jokes about Jews in the gas chambers, those are both jokes I've heard. That's too far to me. Like I actually have a really great Holocaust joke, but the gas chambers are not in it. So my point is that there is clearly a line, and I'm sure anybody in any particular group can think of where that line is crossed for them. And the problem, and we'll get to this in another question, is that no one person and no one group and no government even and no one corporation has ever agreed on where the line is, nor has the right to draw the line for society. So it's almost like a moot point. Like, yes, there's a line. Yes, the role is to cross it. And sometimes people go way too far. And then it's actually just like, again, either too far offensive or too far in the dangerous sense. Oh. That's all I got.
All right. Thanks a lot, Molly. Eric, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm not sure if it's a great idea for stand-up comedians to try and find a line and try and be as offensive as they can, although they're gonna offend somebody just by the nature of stand-up. Maybe some guys that's what they do, and that's how it works for them, and that's my thing. Yeah, part of what I want to see through Braver Angel, polarization, and society getting along, people getting along. I'd like to see people, like Americans, just citizens, being stronger people and being less easily offended. One of my favorite intellectuals these days is, and she's a huge depolarizer, is Irshad Manji. She's she happens to be gay, female, Canadian, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and she's one of her wonderful statements that I think are words to live by is Oh, now I forget them. They're being offended is the price of living in a diverse society. Just a few words, but very, very poignant and very deep, I think. I'll let that stand as it is and go to the next post.
Is she a comedian?
Actually, no. She's kind of she's a public intellectual. She does public intellectual. She wants to do reform in Islam. She has like a different, like a more liberal idea of what Islam should be. She's gotten death threats because she's a liberal Muslim, liberal feminist Muslim, and there are people that there's Muslims that want to take her out exactly because of that. Yes, but yeah, being offended is the price of living in a diverse society. I love that.
Okay, let's hear from Edward from Virginia.
My hand is down, sorry.
Oh, then let's go to Judith.
Hi again. In my opinion, when we talk about crossing the line and we can't agree where that line is, that shuts down the conversation. I think when we say, well, let's explore this, because ultimately what's going to save us is compromise. You know, we have two separate minds, but if we don't talk about it and we don't investigate and we don't think about it and hear each other's points of view, maybe we agree on where the line is. We won't find out unless we're willing to have the conversation.
Well, in the case of comedy clubs, though, seems like it's just a natural sorting, and the people that like that kind of humor will keep that guy's profession going, and the people that, if there's not enough people that find it funny, then they'll just have to find another way to make a living. Anyway, Existential Bob.
Yes, on a serious note, I want to thank Judith for what you just brought up. And I don't want to go to a tangent with this thing now with Scott Adams and the whole Dilbert scenario, but you cannot legislate love. You cannot legislate people not to hate other people. If you have something that you don't like and you keep it to yourselves, you're going to live that way. If you say something that might offend somebody, at least that's an opportunity for conversation, like what's bugging you or whatever. But I do want to throw one question out. I grew up in I'm a 1957 baby. And in the 70s and in the 80s, we'd have what you call rank out sessions. We'd have the blacks versus the whites with jokes back and forth. We were laughing at each other who could insult the other person worser, so to speak. And we got off on that. We laughed at it. We joked with each other. That seems to have disappeared. And, I'm wondering why the cultural shift, where we used to find fun in joking back and forth to each other. Now it's like a taboo subject.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. And I can say to everybody that I'm born and raised in Hawaii. And back in the old days in the 60s, we had lots of comedians who made ethnic jokes, and everybody laughed because this was a plantation society. People grew up with different ethnic groups in different camps on the plantation, and the jokes centered around the different characteristics of the different ethnic groups, what they ate, how they dressed, how they talked. But you can't say that no more. It's completely unacceptable.
But if you had to join a timeline, when did this metamorphosis occur where you had to stop doing it and it became like a bad thing what caused that to happen?
Well, I don't know what caused it, but I think for Hawaii, the timeline starts in the 90s. So you can't blame internet. Anyway, I'll turn it over to the next moderator, which is Molly.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna switch gears a little here. I am going to go to a question.
Molly, we're getting some weird echoing on your line.
Has been alluded to. Who has the right? Who really does? Oh, okay. Let me try to switch to Zoom.
Or Molly, you might try turning off your video as well. That helped me.
Okay. Is
Yeah,
this any better, y'all?
Limited, that may help.
Yeah. I'm in some pretty outlying area, somewhat outlying area, town rather. Who has the right to police jokes? And really, does anyone? And if they do, how should it be done? And by the way, I'm going to start this, but Ivan, if you wouldn't mind calling on the first person, I'm going to try to move locations and see if that helps a little bit here.
Oh, okay. Judith, did you want to chime in on this question? Or is that from before?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I was distracted. What was the question?
Your hand is up.
It is. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Never mind. Forgot to put it down.
Okay. Edward, is your hand up for this question, or is it from before?
It is. Thank you very much. So, okay, the constitutional right is about the government not being able to constrain your speech. Private places can constrain your speech all over the place when they want. Your mosque, your temple, your church can constrain your speech. Your speech can be constrained in your house. Your workplace can constrain your speech. So lots of places have rights to constrain your speech. It's only the government that does not have a right to constrain your speech unless the Supreme Court says you can constrain certain speech, like don't yell fire.
I think, Edward, if I can interrupt, I think the question is not so much in the legalistic point of view, but just generally. We have people that want to silence other people, and regardless of the legality of that.
Well, it was framed in the language of rights, and rights are the matters of law. Yeah,
let me clarify that.
Moral or ethical principles, I can get into that. I'm an ethicist. Thank you.
So let me clarify that, and then Edward, I'd love to go back to you. So when I say who has the right to police jokes, I meant in a more sort of like meta use of the word police. That could be the actual police, like in the case of Lennon Bruce, it could be government. But I also mean like corporations, individuals, social media, censor people, like the people whose job it actually is to censor Twitter, for example, right? So I don't mean exclusively or only literal government forces. So if that helps Edward to answer, then go for it.
I think I'll just refer and let others speak. In general, private places can constrain your speech a lot. Thank you.
All right, Ron,
Well,
see your hand up.
Thank you. The answer to me is a marketplace. All professional comedians are doing this for a living. If they can sell tickets and fill the hall, then they can speak. If nobody buys a ticket, that's your censorship right there, the marketplace. Unfortunately, that's the way it should be. Unfortunately, it's not. And what Edward was indicating is people decide that they can't. Well, I'll go back to David Chappelle. I'm sorry. I go back to David Chappelle. He was in Minneapolis. He sold tickets, and there were people that said he is so offensive. They forced the venue to cancel him, and he had to seek another venue. That's a wrong answer to the question that's being asked. The right answer is the marketplace. If people want to, they have a right to hear. Besides freedom of speech, you have a freedom to hear. And if I want to hear, or you want to hear somebody, you can buy a ticket and go see them. If you don't want to hear them, you cannot buy a ticket. That's the way it should be. Thank you.
Molly, did you want to continue?
Yeah, sure. I can call now. Thomas or Tom, go for it. And then Linda, you're up next.
I generally agree with Mr. Koppel about the marketplace of ideas, particularly if it's in the non-governmental private sector range, although it's even that can be problematic. But I just wanted to add to the conversation. I pointed out what he said just a minute ago, that the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution only applies to government restrictions on speech. And I excerpted a small blurb about that earlier in the chat. The issue now, like you mentioned, social media, a lot of people just instinctively think that social media companies should not be able to censor speech, but they're private for-profit entities, and they can and do that under current law. That's why you have cases pending before the U.S. Supreme Court now regarding regulation of social media companies and whether or not they should have exclusive right to do that as they currently do under law. So it's very contentious because they have such a dominant position in the marketplace of ideas now, you know, and so many people use them and they can drown out other voices. I think that's where we're going to have to see new law created either by legislatures or by legal precedent to resolve that issue once and for all, which I don't think is going to be possible because technology will continue to evolve, creating new problems and new questions about the very thing of what constitutes free speech and who should be able to regulate or censor it, if at all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And what would you like to add? Linda, it looks like you took yourself off, so I'll go with Judith.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to this question about where do we draw the line. Comedy, I think, is easier to debate, but when we talk about lies that rile people up about the election that causes an insurrection, and the irony is that we talk about free speech because it protects our democracy and our rights, but when a group of people take over our government, what is that to our rights? Where do we draw the line when our democracy is threatened? And what would happen to free speech if those people then were in charge?
Can you clarify that last point a little bit, Judith?
You know, I lost my visual. Why is that?
We see you. We see you.
Okay. Can I clarify the last part?
Yeah, to the question.
It's the very last. Yeah.
How does it pertain to the question?
Yeah, because people who take it upon themselves to overthrow our country, I think, are not following the principles of democracy. They are taking upon themselves to determine what our government should be. Are they going to protect our free speech?
Thank you. Yeah, I see some concern there. Alan, you'll be our last one on this question.
No pressure. Regarding some of the constraints on speech and who can do the controlling, which is part of the question that I got, if a controversial speaker 10 or 20 years ago wanted to speak on a college campus, they were usually welcomed. Today, they would probably be censored or not allowed to appear at all. And if they appear, they would probably be heckled and shouted down by the audience members. And there would probably be crowds outside trying to make it clear that they don't want the guy or gal in there and never want to see him again. So that kind of, the free speech side is, to me, really being stifled by those kind of reactions. So those people are really anti-free speech in the purest sense, and they don't feel bad about it at all. And that scares the heck out of me. Bye.
Strong in, thank you. Right, so obviously a lot of people in the movie we learn got canceled over time, and that's just been ramped up recently. So we might get back to that, but I'm gonna get into something aside of this we haven't touched on a whole lot yet, other than one or two of us. What are the reasons that, you know, you may consider completely legitimate, you may feel like don't matter at all? What are the reasons some people get offended while other people don't get offended by what are really in the end jokes? For example, what role do age, like, you know, / generation, religion, or, you know, other cultural background play? Feel free to flag other categories. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, I'm always putting these in the chat. So I'd love to hear from someone we haven't heard from yet. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken who would like to speak to this one? I'm going to give you three chances here. So, I mean, you've got the rest of the Zoom, but going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay, go for it, Alan.
Left my hand up, sorry.
Oh, I still had, that was an accident. Okay. So one thing we're getting into the chat here is a joke about someone's physical condition, about Jada. So why did that bother some people so much that the joke was made at all, but not bother others? And it bothered them much more that, for, you know, that's a specific example, right? Like some people think it's completely fine to joke about disability, and some people think that's completely wrong. Okay, Linda, go for it.
I was a teacher, and when I was teaching back in the 70s, there were jokes about that stuff, and we usually didn't say much. Now I see the younger generation standing up and saying that's offensive, and that's a good thing, I think, if someone makes a joke about a disability, because you're not in their shoes. Maybe they can joke amongst themselves, like the blind person can, you know, make a joke to another blind person, but I don't think someone who isn't in their shoes should be making those kind of jokes. And I think the younger generation gets it. I see my grandchildren, they don't joke like that. They see people as people, and they have empathy. That's, you know, what's wrong with empathy? That's my question.
Yeah, thanks. Go for it, Ron.
Well, for me, growing up in the age of some of the most greatest comics, and I look at it as satire, especially one of my favorite comics, Richard Pryor. And he used the N-word a lot. Now, Richard Pryor went to Africa after a while. And when he was in Africa, he started using that N-word. And the people there looked at him like he was crazy. And he said, what's wrong? He said, because we don't have N's in this country, in Africa. And he came back and he quit using that word. And guess what? He was probably one, other than Lenny Bruce, was almost voted off the island because he wouldn't use the N-word. Because people got so accustomed to him using it in a funny way. But think about Blazing Saddles, okay? Mel Brooks, how he used sexism, racism, the N-word, but it was satire against it. So I think today, maybe people ought to listen more and open their eyes and see where that comedian is coming from, and not quick to pull the off the island thing. And maybe they're not being as abusive as what you think. So I think that's what it is. I don't think people are listening and paying attention.
Wow. All right, we're going to end with Katie and Ellen, and then we'll see if we have time for one more, but try to keep it to about a minute, Katie and Ellen.
All right, I will. Thank you. Wow, that was just wonderful. Thank you. Blazing Saddles is like my husband's favorite movie. There's a saying, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Many times my husband and I are watching things, he's cracking up, and I don't think it's funny. I'm very sensitive. I'm a sensitive person. I'm very empathetic, maybe too empathetic sometimes. And my husband will say to me, Kate, it's a joke. Look at the attention, as the gentleman was saying before. It's the attention behind the joke was there. And I think there is a purity sometimes that gets lost. And my sensitivity I don't always hear that proper intention. So I do believe in free speech. I thank you for offering this, because I think it's so important for comedians to be able to speak and to share that, and for us to have a chance to reflect on, why is it hitting me? What's going on with me that I'm hearing the way I'm hearing it? So thank you.
Thank you. We'll go Alan and then Judith. You'll close us out, Judith. So Alan,
yeah,
thank you. And try to do like a minute or so. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I make it pretty quick. Several people have mentioned, and actually several times, the issue of, well, you haven't walked in my shoes, or, you don't live in their world. So, look at it from their side, and they have every right to be sensitive to that. And it dawned on me the first time that was mentioned, that what you're asking for, or the kind of the only way to get there, is to have a homogeneous society where everyone is the same, so nobody has any reason to pick on each other. But we are a heterogeneous society, a culture, a nation. So I think that's an unreasonable explanation. You're just not going to get there. That'll do. Okay, wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to say, Finland is one of those very homogeneous countries, and we always look to them for education and amazing treatment of homeless and all these things. You don't see a lot of Finnish humor going global. There is something to be said about being a very diverse society, creating a very diverse, hilarious humor. And Judith, close us out. You'll be the last comment of the night, unfortunately, just because we're running out of time here.
Okay, on the word nigger, I just want to share that I was once, I want to share about making assumptions. I was during Obama's campaign, I was speaking to somebody who was, from a kind of blue collar culture. And I said, who are you voting for? And very sincerely, he said, I'm voting for the nigger. And that just made me realize.
Excuse me, Judith.
Yeah.
As the only African-American on this, I am offended for you to say that, even in that narrative. Could you just say the N-word, please?
I'm so sorry. I apologize. Not very sophisticated myself, sorry. And so I realized that this was just a form of cultural speech for him. This is just what he heard in the community and what he learned to say. I'm Jewish, and some neighbor of mine said something disparaging to Jews, and I said, did you know he was Jewish? And she's very apologetic, and she said, there was only one Jew in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and that's just a term we used. I don't have anything against Jews, and I believe she didn't. So I'm just saying that sometimes we have to dig a little deeper before we characterize people. And Ron, I apologize profusely.
Sorry, I was still muted.
It's not that. Apology? You don't have to apologize to me. You might apologize to the comedians.
To the what?
Nothing. I just don't. In this narrative, and the way you were using it is what I was speaking on, because it didn't address the question. It was addressed at Obama, and is he a comedian? It's interesting to me. And that's what my point was of listening. Okay, in the comedian world, and I gave that example of Richard Pryor. Okay, there's a lot of them that still use that word. I don't particularly go to their concerts because I refuse to partake. I'm one of those, I'm not going to spend my money on something that I don't think we should be abusing our people on. But anyway, thank you, Judith. And who's going to close us out? Who's going to close us out? I guess I will. Well, with that Braver Angels moment, we try to let you give your perspective as long as it's, excuse me, not profane. And it's been a lively conversation. I hope we could find something else similar to that again. And those of you who are new to the Braver Angel Film Club and any type of things, go to braverangels.org. You can become a member for $1 a month, $12, sign up, and then you will always be on our email and get notices of when we have other events and things of that nature. It's been a very interesting night. And normally Ron McFarlane, Sugar Bear, he always ends with a smile, begins with a smile, and I will sleep with a smile. It's been a great night. And thank you guys for showing up. Anyway, and in the Braver Angels mode, please give some hands. Those of you who know what it is, we do the little hands and stuff. So
thanks,
anyway.
Ron. Go Cyclones.
Oh yeah, you got it. Yeah, they need to win. They need to win. So. All right.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night. Good night. Have a good night.